Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. We have Lisa Mossie. She is the former township supervisor for Upper Providence Township, and she has agreed to take some time out of her schedule today to talk to us a little bit about the sale of Parkhouse and the story and her role in it. So, Lisa, why don't we start very simple, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your history in Montgomery County and specifically with Parkhouse?
Okay, I was township supervisor in Upper Providence Township from 2012 through December of 2017.
Okay.
I was a one-term supervisor. Most of that had to do with Parkhouse.
Okay.
But so when I came on board, I was just a regular supervisor. We had a three-member board. I was chairman of the board for 3 of my 6 years, vice chairman for 2.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just for those who don't know, township supervisors are basically like boards. If you think about what a mayor would do,
Okay.
a municipality is run by a board. It's either a borough council or a board of supervisors in Pennsylvania.
Gotcha.
So we're in charge of land use and development. We're in charge of sewer, police, fire, plowing the roads, that kind of thing. So that's what falls under the purview of your local government.
Perfect. And can you tell me what kind of experience did you have or knowledge did you have about Parkhouse as an institution before all of the sale occurred? Had you ever had any experience? Had you had a family member or known anyone there?
Yeah, well, my sister-in-law worked there,
Oh, okay.
and also my grandmother
Okay.
was there for quite some time.
Oh, okay. And so
And
you had seen it from that side.
I had seen it from that side. I had some friends who were there that I would go visit, but mostly it was like, there's the water tower, there's the
Yes.
land,
Yes.
and we just knew it as it was Parkhouse,
Right.
or they call it was either the county home or the
Right.
Johnson home.
No, right. It had changed
Yeah,
names a lot.
changed names a lot. Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
but it was always there. It was always an institution.
always there.
Now,
Always there.
do you mind me asking, were you born and raised in Montgomery County
Yeah,
or?
well, I was born in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
Spent very, very early years in Drexel Hill,
Mhm.
and then moved to Montgomery County when I was 10, and
Mhm.
grew up in Upper Merion Township in King of
Right.
Prussia, and lived there until about, gosh, almost 27 years ago now.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've been out here for quite some time.
Great. Okay. So you have roots in the community.
Yes,
You've been here for a really long time and you
yes,
have some interaction with Parkhouse on a personal level before this whole thing came about.
that's right.
And you mentioned about the role of a township supervisor,
Mhm.
sort of as that board, as
Yes.
sort of the replacement of mayors.
It's yeah, like a borough will have a mayor,
Mhm.
and then it will have a council, like Philadelphia has a mayor and then a
Sure.
city council.
Okay.
So in Upper Providence and in a lot of municipalities, townships of the second class, you
Mhm.
have a board of supervisors. It's 3 members or 5 members, and
Mhm.
if it's a bigger concentration, I mean, I don't need to go down this tangent, but that's basically how it
Yeah.
works.
But
Yeah,
at that time it was 3 members and you were one.
3 members.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And I think I should mention it. The reason why we're concerned about Upper Providence Township is because this is the township where the Parkhouse property lives.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly,
Gotcha.
exactly. It's 180, it's 180 acres. What's left of it is
What's
180 acres.
Gotcha.
Um,
Which is
basically a
pretty
farm.
big. Do you happen to know, and I'm just springing this on you, but do you happen to know
Mhm.
the total area of Upper Providence in terms of, I know I'm completely springing that on you.
You are completely springing that on
Yeah.
me, and I did used to know that off the top of
Okay.
my head. Now
Yeah.
I don't.
Sorry. Sorry. I just when you say how large of a facility that it is, it's
Mhm.
sometimes difficult to visualize, and so that's why I was just thinking, I'm like, geez, I wonder what it is, but that's definitely
Yeah,
something I can probably post with the video afterwards.
I want to say 17
Okay.
miles,
17
square
square
miles.
miles.
I want to
Okay.
say that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's a number that leaps to mind.
Okay.
So you
But
can
no
double
matter
check
how
me on
you
that, Shauna.
slice it, It's a big space. It's a big chunk
Oh,
of land.
there's no doubt. So Upper Providence, for people who aren't familiar with it, we have the pharmaceuticals, we have SmithKline, we have Glaxo, we have Dow,
Right.
we have SCI. So we have some big pharmas here. The township developed according to a really well thought out comprehensive plan that was put
Okay.
into place back in like the early 90s when the
Okay.
pharmaceuticals came in.
Mhm.
And the Parkhouse plot, which is 180 acres,
Mhm.
was always contemplated as being open space.
Right. Because the
So
county owned it and designated it as such.
that's right.
Right.
That's right. It was county designated open space. It was on all of their open space plans as open space. It was on all of their comprehensive plans as open space. It was on Upper Providence's open space plan. It was on Upper Providence's comprehensive plan
Mhm.
designated open space.
And it had
Yes.
been there for so long that obviously a large segment of the community used that open space. I mean,
Still
obviously
does.
Parkhouse and
Yeah.
the residents used it, but then also members of the community would come because you've got access to the Schuylkill River right there. You've got the zoo, right? That's right
Yes.
there, the Schuylkill Valley Zoo. So there's all kinds of different uses that
Yeah.
property was being used for at the time.
Yeah. The
So,
Upper Schuylkill Valley Park is right across the street on the other side of 113.
right.
Yeah.
And that also is county owned.
That is county owned,
Is county owned still.
even though they sold that as part of the sale and then
They sold it.
back. They
Oh,
sold it and then condemned it back.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, we can get into that when we
Okay,
talk about the
okay.
sale.
So now that we know what the township supervisor and those individuals do, can you explain to me a little bit about how you operate in relation to the county commissioners? So what kind of
Uh,
interactions would you have from a political standpoint?
From a political standpoint, honestly, not much.
Okay.
So when we would have a land development plan, the most we actually interacted with the county
Mhm.
is when something came up with county land,
Okay.
or when a land development plan comes in. We have our own planning commission, we have our own township planner,
Mhm.
but when a land development plan comes in, the county has to look it over,
Mhm.
and they kind of look it over as far as, is it compliant with Montgomery County's comprehensive plan? Is it compliant with the township's comprehensive plan?
Mhm.
And they offer suggestions. We would like to see this bike path. We would like to see this this many parking spaces, that kind of thing. And it's mostly according to code. So everything on the comprehensive plan is basically driven off of the township zoning code, and the township has ultimate responsibility over their zoning code.
Mhm.
And that pretty much dictates how many units you can build, what kind of uses you can have in certain parcels.
Right.
And that's basically how the comprehensive plan is developed. So then you get an idea of um, how many residents you can expect over the course of so many years.
Okay. Sure.
And then you can plan for infrastructure. You can plan for how many police you might need, for
Right.
how much sewer capacity you're going to need,
Gotcha.
that kind of stuff. So
Because that's all the township responsibility.
that's right.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
So that all gets based off of our comprehensive plan, which is all in turn based off of our zoning code.
Okay. So it's not necessarily like a hierarchy situation where
No,
the county
absolutely
commissioners
not.
are over top. You're independent.
That's
You
right.
function independently. You both function and are sort of after different goals and different sort of guidelines that you each have to meet in the form of either the zoning code, or the codes
Yes.
that you approve, or your votes and what you approve individually or not. So is there ever a situation where, for example, a county can make a decision that impacts the township that the township doesn't approve of? Is that a possibility or no?
Other than the sale of Parkhouse?
Right.
Okay.
Right. In general.
So in general, I mean, so the only thing, so the county government was once described to me as basically landlords.
Okay.
So that was basically how county government was described to me. Is the county owns a lot of properties and they're basically landlords. They have the row offices and they run some the courts and stuff like that. But their jurisdiction is they don't have jurisdiction over the townships. The townships are kind of sovereign.
Right.
The only time that there could be any kind of um, uh, uh, conflict is
Mhm.
when the county has some county-owned land or wants to do something that the township doesn't
Doesn't
want to.
want them to do.
And there's plenty of county-owned land in Upper Providence. There's the Upper Schuylkill Valley Park, as we said,
Right.
and there's also the lower Perkiomen Valley Park, which is right off of 422 there.
Right.
So there's
By the
and
right. I'm
right
sorry. I was
by
gonna say by the movie
422
theater,
exit.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then, there's county trails that come through, and
Mhm.
those kinds of things are where you have to work with the county because you're trying to make trail connections.
Right.
And so there's intercooperation,
Mhm.
but there's not a whole lot of it. Not a whole lot.
Gotcha. Okay. So it rarely comes up that
Right.
there's an issue like this. So this was unique. This situation.
Yeah, it was unprecedented,
Okay.
actually.
Never happened before. We never had an issue like this. Mhm.
We've never had an issue like this because for 40 years,
Mhm.
Montgomery County has been running around spending millions of dollars acquiring open space.
Right.
So for the county to decide to sell open space
Right.
was kind of unprecedented and shocking,
Right. And when you
to
say
say the
open
least.
space, just to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about is, there's the Parkhouse home, right? And the nursing center that's there, and where all the residents live. And then there is acres and acres of space that's attached to it that is owned with that property. And so that's what we're referring to when we talk about
Yes, well, was owned with that property. It has been since subdivided.
that. Right.
But yes, it's 180 acres that surrounds the
That
original Parkhouse facility. Yes.
Okay. So in the year 2013 was really the year that, the writing sort of became on the wall and everybody sort of was made aware that the county was looking to sell. And we had three county commissioners at the time. It was Josh Shapiro, Leslie
Mhm.
Richards, and
Yes.
Bruce Castor, I believe.
Yes.
They were our three county commissioners at
Correct.
the time. It was just for history's sake, that's two Democrats and a Republican.
Yes.
Um, and so at the time when this sale was sort of moving forward, you had written a letter to the editor
Mhm.
and sent it out to a handful of news outlets because you were very suspicious of the proposed sale.
Yes.
And so that letter to the editor is going to be included with this video for people to
Mhm.
read if they're interested. And can you explain a little bit about why you were suspicious in that letter? What prompted you to write that letter?
Okay, so we became aware that something might be happening with the Parkhouse property probably back in February
Okay,
of 2013.
2013. Hmm.
2013. So because the county very quietly put out what they call an RFI, which is a request for information.
Hmm.
They put that out very quietly, and the only place they advertised it was in the patch.
Okay.
So I found out about it because I have a Google alert on anything Upper Providence. So it
Right.
came into my inbox, and I was like, "Wow, what is this?"
Hmm.
And at the time, the county was having financial problems,
Right.
left over from the Logan Square deal, which is a whole nother story about the movie studio that was going in there.
And that article is also included in
Yes.
our content. So
So we'll get
individuals
back
will
to
have
that.
access to that as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we'll get back to that because
Mhm.
that's a key part of this.
Okay.
So the county was having some difficulty left over from that.
Mhm.
We had two Democrats in office. First time Democrat majority was running the courthouse, and those Democrats ran on a no tax pledge.
Let's talk about that for a second because
Sure.
that actually is a huge piece of news, right?
Yes.
Meaning that for years and years, for as long as Montgomery County has been a county,
That's right.
it
Yes.
has been under a Republican majority set of commissioners. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then right before in the election, right before this, I don't know the exact year. It probably
It
was.
was the same. It was 2011 was the election year, so they came into office actually the same year I did, which was
Okay.
2012.
So
Yeah.
right there, right before this situation, it was a massive shift where,
Yes.
even though what happened is it was 2-1 and it flipped 2-1, two
Yeah.
Democrats, one Republican, that was a huge shift for the county. And that had
Huge.
never happened before, ever.
No,
So that
no.
was another unprecedented change.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
one of the things you were saying those individuals were running on was a promise of no tax increase?
No tax increase. It was a no tax pledge.
Okay.
And there was also there was also this big promise of zero-based budgeting, that they were
Okay.
going to fix the Montgomery County budget with this zero-based budgeting. They didn't exactly explain. There's a very famous YouTube clip of Margaret Gibbons questioning Josh Shapiro, like, well, what are you going to do with this zero-based budgeting? How is that going to work? And Josh just kept repeating everything. And Margaret Gibbons goes, "You've been in the state house too long, Josh. You don't answer." But
Right.
I believe that interview is still out there
Out
on
there.
YouTube somewhere. Yeah.
Okay. So it was
Yeah.
a major shift. It's
Mhm.
now the Democrats were in charge, and one of their first orders of business, really, because of this was just recent, right after the election, was to somehow close this budget gap, right?
Yes.
And that had
Yes.
occurred under the previous administration, right? So they
That had occurred as a result of the Logan Square deal.
right,
So
which had
they were
happened
left with a $24.5 million budget hole.
which is
And they had
big. Yeah.
it's big, but it's not quite the $500 million they're spending on the courthouse to renovate that. So
Gotcha.
let's just put that in perspective.
Which is right. Okay.
Yeah, let's just put that in perspective.
Okay.
So
What made you suspicious, I guess, of the sale at that time? I mean, obviously there was this Logan Square deficit that they had to, make up
right.
for. But was there anything
Which
else
is not something that I knew about at the time. I knew they had this budget hole, and I also knew, because I had been paying attention, that they were I called it at the time a fire sale. So they were unloading properties, and
okay.
there were significant properties that they were unloading. They used to own the former Sacred Heart Hospital,
Oh,
and that was senior living, and they sold that.
in
There were a
Marshall.
couple, yeah, there were a couple other properties that they were selling, and just unceremoniously selling them. And then we see this very quiet RFI come through on the patch of all places.
Mhm.
And I kind of talked to my my planner, and I said, I think they're going to try and sell Parkhouse.
Mhm.
And he says, that's kind of what I'm getting too.
Hmm.
So that was when we first became suspicious of it. The fact that the county never reached out to us and told us that that's what they planned on doing,
Mhm.
was when they finally announced the
Right.
sale.
Right.
That was what prompted my letter writing.
Okay. Because they never came to Upper Providence Township.
They were
And
selling the largest parcel of land,
Mhm.
undeveloped land left in Upper Providence Township.
Mhm.
And they did not give the township a heads up about it at all,
Okay. Ever.
at all, ever, ever. So, prior to that all going down, the township was engaged in this kind of cleanup zoning. We had so the zoning, which is very important, the zoning on Parkhouse right now as it stands is open space conservation with an institutional overlay. So it's basically an open space parcel, but you can develop institutional uses. And by institutional uses, obviously nursing homes,
Right.
continuing care retirement communities, schools, churches,
Okay.
things like that, hospitals,
Gotcha.
Institutional uses, not residential.
Gotcha.
So that's how it's zoned right now. And there's a lot of open space requirements in that.
Mhm.
According to the current zoning right now that's on the property, the land there is about 10% developable. So he could develop about 10% of the 180 acres.
Okay.
But before that, we were in the midst of doing a survey
Mhm.
of all of the publicly owned land in Upper Providence and just doing some cleanup work on that. We had to do some cleanup work on our institutional, because our institutional was allowing for a certain use that we didn't like.
Mhm.
So we wanted to rewrite that code. And we were also going through and looking for all of the publicly owned spaces, any township, state, or county owned spaces. And we were just going to put the open space
On.
zoning on that.
So
Because
it's like double zone now, because
yes,
the
well,
county
it was
would zone
always,
it, and then Upper Providence would zone it.
what's that?
So the county would zone it or
No,
designate
the
it
county has no control over the zoning.
Oh,
Zero
okay.
control over the
Okay,
zoning.
so when they just designate
They
open.
designate open
Okay.
space. So there's a little bit of legal wiggle room there, because
Mhm.
one of the things that they used to say was that it isn't technically open space. And by that, they mean it wasn't acquired
Mhm.
through the county's open space program.
I see, okay.
Actually, the land was acquired because it was donated back in 1803 by wealthy landowners
Right,
so that the poor and indigent could farm it for themselves.
right.
So that's the history of the land. So when the zoning came through, Parkhouse was originally zoned R1, which is residential, basically shorthand, one house per acre.
Gotcha.
So we said, that should be open space. There was a couple other parcels in the township that were municipally owned that were zoned something different. And we were like, we're going to clean up all this zoning.
Now,
So
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but was that a coincidence? Was it a coincidence that you
it
were
was,
doing that?
it
at the
was
exact
because
same
we,
time?
yeah, because we had problems with our institutional the
Okay.
year before. So
Oh, I
we were already, that was already on our radar. So we were already doing some cleanup ordinances with that.
Mhm.
So, but then, it was just like, it was fortuitous because we were like, well, thank gosh, we're zoning this open space now if
Mhm.
they're going to sell it.
Right.
So funny enough, how I said earlier, we would send in plans to the county for the county to bless them.
Mhm.
So we had this whole thing that we were going to do with the rezoning of all these publicly owned properties.
Mhm.
And we sent it to the county for their review.
Mhm.
And funny enough, in May of that year of 2013, the county was fine with us rezoning all of the other publicly owned spaces in
Okay.
Upper Providence, except for Parkhouse.
So they had an issue with it, but they didn't connect it to the fact that they might sell it.
They did not.
So
They
what
just
did
said
they
it was
tell you
not,
was the issue?
pardon me?
What did they tell you was the issue?
They told us it wasn't compatible with the land use that the county had designated for it
Okay.
at the time. That
Right.
was what they said. It was kind of a feeble excuse.
Okay. So
All right.
you think that this was a golden opportunity for them to share their plan with you?
There was
And
many opportunities for them to share the plan with us.
right,
I
and they
mean,
just did not.
yeah, what's that?
And you think that the reason that they did not was because why?
Because they were selling open space to a developer, and they didn't want what happened to happen.
So they didn't want opposition.
They didn't want opposition. They wanted to quietly sell it
Mhm.
and say, nobody said anything to us. We were fine with it. And they wanted to sell this property because it was really a land deal to begin with.
Okay. And you're suspicious of it because you
I
feel
was,
like it's a
yeah,
land.
I was suspicious of it because the way the sale was framed, well, first of all, our suspicions were raised when we got that review letter back from the County Planning Commission. So
Okay.
that was the first, and that was before any sale was announced.
Okay.
And any RFP was put out. So the county put out an RFP in June.
Mhm.
So we got this review letter back in May.
Okay.
So the county put out an RFP, which is the request for proposal to actually buy the facility. Or they actually did solicit people to come in and run it privately.
Okay. Mhm.
Because how the county was framing this
Mhm.
was that the Parkhouse as a going concern was losing $2 million a year.
Right.
And if I could just as a sidebar, over in Chester County also has a county home. It's called the
Okay.
Copson Home.
Mhm.
And several years ago, Chester County was thinking about selling their home as well. And instead of just unilaterally making that decision, they put it on the ballot and asked the residents,
Oh, okay.
want to sell this. And they put it as a referendum on the ballot, and
Right.
the residents overwhelmingly said, no, we don't care how much money it loses.
Wow.
We have a dedication to our elderly, and we don't mind our tax dollars going to pay for that.
Wow.
So this sale was framed as caring for the elderly and running a nursing home was not one of the core functions
Right. Okay.
of county government.
Right.
And the fact that they said it was losing $2 million, but when I looked at the county financials had kind of everything just kind of dumped together.
Mhm.
So there was no separate
Mhm.
funding for Parkhouse. So you couldn't see the dollars coming in and the dollars going out. It was just all dumped into the county pot.
And
And
all
then,
you're left with is whatever the final number is.
right. But you don't even know, you couldn't tell from the county financials
Mhm.
whether Parkhouse was making money or not.
Okay.
You couldn't
I
tell
got
that because everything was in there.
Every
The sheriff's department,
Mhm.
everything. Everything's
okay.
all in one financial statement. They don't break it out by funds and say, well, here's Parkhouse, here's what Parkhouse brings in, and here's what Parkhouse sends
I
out.
got you. Mhm.
It's just, here's what Montgomery County brings in, here's what Montgomery County puts out.
Okay.
So we've never been able to see that. We had to take Uri Monson's word for that, who was the county treasurer at the time, or
Okay.
financial.
All right. So, another part of the story, and we're going to get into, some of the things that you did because you opposed the sale. You were organizing some things,
Mhm.
and so we'll get into that in just a second. But then there was another piece of the story that started to come up and sort of bubble up to the surface. And that is an individual named Dr. Menkowitz. Can you
Yes.
tell me a little bit about who is Dr. Menkowitz and why is he important to this story?
So Dr. Menkowitz was a county doctor who worked at Parkhouse. He was a county employee.
Okay.
Worked at the Parkhouse, and he was also part of the buying group with the new buying people, with the developer.
So he was working with
He
the
was working with
private company
Yes,
that
he was
was
working with the buyers
Mhm,
while he was working for the
the
county.
county. Okay.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And
And
so
yeah,
right.
so
Okay.
one of the funny things about this was, and this was when they announced, so I just want to go back a little bit
Sure.
because during the course of this, our group filed several RTK requests, which are right to know requests.
Mhm,
And one of them was an email sweep.
mhm.
And through that email sweep, we actually uncovered an email from Scott Rifkin, who is the current owner and
The
who
CEO
was
of the buying
of,
company.
of the buying company.
Mhm.
A letter from Scott Rifkin to Josh Shapiro,
Okay.
dated
County
August,
commissioner.
yes,
Mhm.
dated August 8th, 2012.
2012.
2012.
Okay.
And that letter was expressing interest. He heard that the property might be for sale
Oh,
and he was expressing interest in buying it.
oh,
So, yes.
okay.
So, so then the county puts out the RFP in June.
Mhm.
In July, they opened the bids. There were 55 bids.
Now,
And
RFP, just to go back, is request for
request for
proposal.
proposal.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
that
that
was,
is when the county puts out people the opportunity. Basically, it advertises the opportunity to put a bid in this case for Parkhouse
yes.
to purchase it.
Yes, and it wasn't just, it's not just like, tell us what you want to pay for it.
Okay.
This was, the request for proposal was, tell us what you're going to do to run this place.
Okay.
So it was, it was more than just buying the land,
Okay.
even though that was like the big
Sure.
thing
Okay.
that was driving the sale.
Mhm.
So when they opened the bids in July, 55 people submitted proposals for this.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, the very same man who sent that email to Josh Shapiro in 2012, before any RFIs or RFPs went out, was the man who won the bid.
Won the bid.
And one of the things that always stuck out to me was we were invited to that county commissioners meeting when they announced the sale.
Mhm.
And they had a working group and to evaluate the viability and evaluate the bids and everything else. Well, that working group consisted entirely of county employees. There was no representatives from the public there at all. They were
Oh,
all county employees who decided to sell this and evaluated the sale.
so no patients,
No patients,
no patient family members,
no patient family members, no
no
members of the general public.
no members of the general public at all. They were all people who were paid by the county to
That's right.
work. So I think I read in one of the articles that we did in our research that the Parkhouse administrator, McGarry,
Yes,
she was on that working group, I believe. So that's
she
an
was on that
example of
working group.
somebody who,
She
yeah.
was on that working group. So when I was at that meeting,
Hmm.
and it didn't, at that point, we didn't know about Dr. Mankiewicz, but when I was
Okay.
at that meeting, Melanie McGarry spoke very eloquently at this meeting in favor of selling this property to Mid-Atlantic,
Hmm.
because one of her slogans was always care for the caregivers. That was her slogan.
Okay.
And when she was sold, when Rifkin repeated that back to her as his own philosophy,
Oh.
she was almost in tears when she said it. And
Oh.
I thought, isn't that interesting? I
Huh.
wonder how that came about.
Okay.
Was that just coincidence?
Okay.
Maybe. Or was it they needed to win over Melanie McGarry? Because Melanie McGarry was against the sale
Hmm.
until then.
Okay. So and then there is a news article that is part of the reading attached to this project where I believe she says, she's quoted as saying she did a 180.
Yes,
And and she ultimately went from being completely opposed to the sale
adamantly opposed to
to
it.
being an advocate, for
Yes,
the sale. Mhm.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you feel like it was that moment that you're describing that did it.
Well, I think that was it, because
Mhm.
she said that in the meeting. She
Mhm.
said that in the meeting, and she got like, filled up. She got very emotional
You
about
picked
it.
up. Mhm.
And, she was absolutely a true believer. I think they're going to take care of us. I think they're going to take care of our employees. I think they're going to take care of our elderly. So
Mhm.
she was definitely on board with it. And
Mhm.
we heard from all 8 of those people. Now, when we were invited to this meeting as
Mhm.
township supervisors and the 3 of us all went,
Mhm.
we were not told that this was what this meeting was about.
Okay.
We were not told that this was when they were going to announce that they had decided to sell the place.
Okay.
So the point of it was that we were sitting in the audience, and then we didn't say anything.
Mhm.
That was what they were hoping for. It's not what they got,
Right.
because I raised my hand,
Mhm.
had a few things to say about selling this property,
Right.
um, which is what put me on their radar.
Mhm.
So,
So just to go back to Dr. Mankiewicz, because that's sort of how our question sort of started. The
mhm,
reason why his story is unique is because he's a physician. He
mhm.
works for the county, or he worked for the county at the time, and then it came to fruition that he also worked for this other entity.
Well, Dr.
And
Mankiewicz, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, and then through investigation discussions, it turns out that he also is a real estate developer.
Well, Dr. Mankiewicz
Mhm.
was what I'd like to call a serial entrepreneur. He
Okay.
has many, many LLCs and LPs
Okay.
listed as him being, so the company that he formed was called GANAS, GANAS.
Okay.
That was part of the buying group.
Okay.
But we didn't find out about Dr. Mankiewicz until, so we had the county meeting where they announced the sale in October.
Mhm.
We actually didn't find out about Dr. Mankiewicz until I think it was like late January,
Okay.
because the county controller, Stuart Greenleaf,
Mhm.
did an investigation, and he uncovered Mankiewicz in there.
Okay.
And of course, the county commissioners were shocked that
Mhm.
he was involved and promptly fired Dr. Mankiewicz.
So
Now,
Dr. Mankiewicz at that point lost his job with the county.
lost his job with the county.
Okay.
Yes.
Because and I think I read in an article that his defense is that if I wasn't supposed to be working for both sides, I think what he said is someone should have told me. I think
Right.
if I might
Yeah,
I'm,
something like
I
that.
might be butchering it, but so it's not a direct quote, but that was sort of his defense in a news article. It was
Yes.
almost like he didn't realize that there was a conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't realize that there was a conflict, that he was buying in with the buying property.
Right.
And
And then also working for the county at the same
yeah.
time.
So how much involvement he had with swaying the employees over to this is unclear.
Okay.
We don't know that. We
And we
can
never could.
we never will. We
Right,
never will.
right.
There's
And
no
we
way we'll
won't,
ever know.
right. But it was an interesting twist that came out through the process, and it was just kind of an example of how complicated this
Yes.
story kind of is, and there's so
It's
many different moving parts to it. So
yeah.
I thought it was interesting, and I know that I knew that you would know a little bit about that situation.
Yeah.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
So just moving a little forward here, you seem like, in reading your letter to the editor, and even in this interview today, obviously you have a lot of opposition to the fact that the sale included this open space.
Yes.
So did you have any other reasons to oppose the sale? Was there anything else, or was it just the open space, the real estate portion of it that really bothered you? Obviously, as a supervisor, you were representing your constituents. That's clear. But is there anything else that stuck out to you?
So at the time, one of the things that bothered me about it, and so at the time, we were concerned about the quality of care that the residents there were going to get.
Okay.
Because Mid-Atlantic had just purchased 5 nursing facilities in Philadelphia from New Cortland, and they had just spent $75 million. So they were on a buying spree. So we were concerned about the longevity of Mid-Atlantic. We were concerned about the jobs over there. We were concerned about the care that the elderly was going to get. Ultimately, as a township, we had no jurisdiction over that.
There was really nothing you could do.
There was nothing we could do about the
position.
county. Yeah, from my position, there was nothing I could do. I know a lot of residents, family members wrote to the county about this, and they got reassurances from the commissioners themselves. I have that in my RTK as well, that these are very experienced people, and they're going to give us top quality care. And you had a parade of county employees who were on the task force looking at this sale, and were just speaking glowingly of Mid-Atlantic as far as how well they would manage the facility.
Gotcha.
So when we didn't want the facility to be sold, but from our position, whether the county wanted to keep in the nursing home business or not was not a battle that we could effectively fight.
There was nothing you could do about it. So
there really wasn't. So we decided to focus on the portion of the problem that directly affected our township, which was the sale of the space.
Okay. Yeah. So let's get into some exciting information. So you are quite the organizer, and it turned out. So tell me a little bit about what type of organizing you did in order to protest the sale. So you knew that you had an opposition to it. You knew that there were certain members of the community in your constituency that would have an opposition to it. So what kinds of things how did you sort of rally that and bring people together?
Okay, so at the end of October, the county had come in to apply for what they called a natural subdivision. So originally, the Parkhouse parcel was the same parcel as the Upper Schuylkill Valley Park.
So all included in one big.
All included in one parcel, and they wanted us to subdivide it through 113. They didn't submit a full application, and we denied it. So the Planning Commission was evaluating this plan, and we weren't sure if we were going to have an opportunity to speak to the county about this ever again. So we were looking at this Planning Commission meeting as our last chance effort to get our voices heard to the county before this sale went through.
So because up until this point, so just so we're on the right timeline here, they put out the request for proposals. They got their bids back in. They are evaluating them, and they know in the back of their mind they have this Upper Schuylkill Valley Park that they don't want to include in the sale. So they know they have to cut that off of basically the Parkhouse property. And the only way that they could do that was by coming to the township and saying this. And so from your perspective, because they hadn't sort of shared any information with you all along, you thought, okay, this is our chance. They have to come to us. So this is what we're gonna do.
They have to, yeah. So at this point, so, just so we can go back to the timeline, so the bids were opened in July.
Okay.
We had at the beginning of October gone to the county commissioners meeting where they announced they're going to sell the property to Mid-Atlantic.
Oh, okay,
The
so they
end of
already announced that
They had already
got-
announced the
okay.
sale,
Mhm.
and it was on the fast track, going downhill, grease the skids, everything, because they wanted to close it before the end of the year.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we were feeling a real squeeze on this.
Gotcha.
So we had this planning commission meeting where they had to come in for the subdivision because that's our jurisdiction.
Sure.
Like they don't have any jurisdiction over that. They have to come to us for that.
Mhm.
So what I did was I alerted the neighbors because I knew I had been in touch with some of the neighbors because they had come to us. They thought that we were supporting this.
Right.
They thought that we were just going along to get along. And I'm like, oh no, absolutely not. We're not supporting this.
Mhm.
So I told everybody I could.
Mhm.
I called newspapers. I called all of the broadcast networks.
Okay.
We ended up getting, I think we ended up getting the Times Herald there. And this was way before the days when we used to broadcast, when we used to tape our township meetings.
Meeting.
So
Mhm.
there was no record of it anywhere. It was just like whatever happened in the meeting happened in the meeting. And it was just like,
And
well,
that was
he
it.
said this happened and he said that happened. There was no video record of it.
Right.
So I actually brought a video camera and taped
Okay.
that meeting.
Okay.
So the meeting room was packed. We had a ton of people there. Also, coincidentally, maybe not, I've been in politics long enough to know that there are no coincidences in politics, but the morning of our Parkhouse meeting with the planning commission, the one that we had gotten everybody to come to, that we talked to all the press to really blow this up, was the same day that the head of the Montgomery County Republican Committee, Bob Kearns, got arrested for sexual assault.
Oh my goodness.
It was the very same day.
Exact same day. Okay.
That morning.
Mhm.
So it was like a punch in the gut to me because I
Right.
knew, well, first of all, because I knew Bob Kearns and I didn't know him to be that kind of a person, but
Sure. So that was shocking by itself.
that was shocking by itself.
Right.
But the other thing that was shocking to me was that now that was going to suck all of the press attention, all
Right.
the oxygen for the
Right.
press out of the room,
Mhm.
and my Parkhouse story wasn't going to get the attention that it deserved.
Right.
Because our goal all the time was to raise awareness
Awareness.
throughout the county,
Right.
to get the county involved, because it's if the county is going to sell open space,
Mhm.
I mean, the county owns a lot of parks, they own a lot of trails, they own a lot of open space in Montgomery County,
Mhm.
and it could be yours the next time they
Right.
get into a budget crunch.
Right.
So that was our rallying cry.
Sure.
So we had that meeting in October.
Mhm.
And that was basically like us stuffing flyers in mailboxes.
Yeah.
Come to this meeting,
Mhm.
Parkhouse, come to this meeting, talk to the county commissioner. Well, the commissioners didn't come. They sent their solicitor.
How many people did you end up getting at that meeting?
At that meeting, I have no idea. It was the meeting room was packed. I
Yeah.
want to say it was standing room only.
Mhm.
So there had to be upwards of 80 to 100 people in that room, and that was
Mhm.
a big room.
So ultimately, what happened?
Ultimately, what happened was the planning commission, I think, delayed
Mhm.
on that.
Mhm.
So we were able to drag it out a little bit until December,
Mhm.
when the county came in and what did they do? I'm trying to remember the sequence of events on that, because eventually what happened with it was, because we wouldn't grant the subdivision because their application wasn't complete.
Right.
Their argument was, well, 113 is the natural subdivision, so we don't need to give you all of this other stuff. And we're like, well, yeah, you really do.
Mhm.
So we're going to deny your application.
Mhm.
So what they ended up doing was they ended up actually selling Upper
Right.
Schuylkill Valley Park, which
Right.
was 70 acres,
Mhm.
and then they condemned it back. So they sold the whole thing for 42, or 41, and then they bought back they bought back the county park for $2 million.
So if 40, you're talking about $1 million when you said 41 or 42? 40,
Yeah,
so they
yeah,
sold it for
million.
$41 million, and then
Mhm.
they bought back that piece of the park, that park.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
that the county now still owns Upper Schuylkill Valley Park.
Yes, and then the county commissioners got to, praise their good name and say, look, we've permanently preserved 70 acres of open space in Upper Providence, which was only in danger because they sold it.
Right.
That's the only reason that any open space that's county owned would ever be in danger is because the county sold it.
Got it. Okay.
So it drug on into 2014.
Mhm.
And at the end of 2013, my little group decided to start holding a series of rallies.
Did your little group have a name?
We called it Save Parkhouse. It's now
Okay.
changed its name to Remember Parkhouse.
Okay, gotcha.
But it was
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
it
And
was
so you
Save
started having like
rallies.
Rallies. Okay.
Yeah. So we were protesting in front of the courthouse.
Mhm.
We held a series of about, I think it was like 11 rallies. So it was
Okay.
every Saturday
Mhm.
in December, at the end of December, January, and February.
Oh, what
And
great days
it was
to stand outside.
the weather. We protested in pouring rain.
Yeah.
We protested in snow. We protested in ice cold temperatures.
Wow.
It was amazing, and we had people out every single time. So we protested in front of the courthouse. We protested in front of Parkhouse.
Mhm.
We protested in front of the Norristown Farm Park,
Wow.
and we also protested in front of Logan Square,
Okay.
which was the reason that our open space got sold.
Right, because it's the connection to that.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Or that development project. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while all of this was going on, because ultimately they had accepted the bid from Mid-Atlantic in
Yes.
October, and then you protested after that.
Well, we protested after that. But the sale wasn't final.
Okay. When did
the sale
get right?
Okay, so the sale wasn't final at this point. So
Okay.
our little planning commission meeting was at the end of October.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, I was busy writing letters to the editor. I was writing letters to every single municipal leader in Montgomery County.
Right.
I was writing letters to Sierra Club. I was writing letters to Natural Lands Trust. Nobody would help us.
Really?
Nobody would help us. All of the letters that I sent out, only one municipality came and stood with us, and that was Limerick Township.
Okay.
Everybody else kind of ran for the hills. As a matter of fact, I got in our RTK discovery, one of the townships actually was running to daddy and said, I think you should know this agitating is going on. So
they went to the commissioners and told
they were running to the commissioners.
They told on you.
Yeah, they told on us. Exactly. So I know it's funny, right? They run to daddy. Yeah, I think you should know about this.
That's okay. Now, did in all of this opposition and you put this movement together, did you ever get any response from the commissioners themselves?
No, the commissioners really never talked to us. Never talked to us.
No.
They sent their attorneys in to bark at us. As a matter of fact,
you were protesting?
No, at board meetings.
At your meetings. Okay.
So they also wanted to do, they wanted to put some development plan in at the Upper Schuylkill Valley, not the Upper Schuylkill Valley Park. No, Lower Perkiomen Valley Park, the one over by Oaks.
Okay.
They wanted to put some kind of maintenance garage in. And they came in with their plan, and they used that opportunity to kind of come in and bark at us. They sent their attack lawyer in to bark at us. And we had asked them to kind of move this garage so that it wasn't visible from 422.
Right. Okay.
The lawyer told us, he's like, well, if you guys would be more cooperative with Parkhouse, maybe we would be more cooperative with you.
Oh,
And,
okay.
it was probably not the best thing to say because there was people in the audience who kind of booed and hissed them. And,
Oh, okay.
we were kind of like, oh, so this quid pro quo, is that what this is all about?
Right, right.
So needless to say, that plan never got built.
The
Never got built.
the one that they were pitching at the
Yeah,
time
the
where
one
they
that they were pitching was kind of like, yeah, we're gonna put this maintenance garage in, but it was kind of like, they kind of used that opportunity to come in and bark at us
I
and,
gotcha. So it really
try and
wasn't about
intimidate
the
us.
maintenance shed, it was about is we're gonna come back and
Did they ever build that maintenance shed? I don't even remember at this
I don't
point.
remember. Well, I'll have to drive on 422 and see if we see a
Yeah,
maintenance shed
I'll
off
have to go
the
look because I don't think they ever built it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's
In
pretty,
that park there. Okay. So
yeah, it's,
no reply from the commissioners.
the
Uh,
commissioners never talked to us,
okay.
never talked to us. I did write directly to Leslie Richards
Okay.
because Leslie Richards was heavily involved in preserving open space in her own township.
Okay.
Um,
And
Leslie Richards,
do you know what her township was? Just so
White Marsh, was it
Whitehall,
White
White
Marsh? There
Marsh?
was
Okay,
no
White
White Marsh or
okay.
Plymouth, one of those. She was
Okay.
down in that
Okay.
area down there.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
By the Montgomery County Community, like right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Leslie's response to me was that she didn't think I was representing this sale properly. That was her.
In your letter when you asked her for help,
Yeah,
she didn't think that the way you described the issue was correct.
that's right. That's what she said to me.
Okay. And that was her only response?
That was her only response. Now I did run into her at a township. There's a township convention of township supervisors. They have one on the state level called PSATs. They have one on the local level called Mikado. And
Okay.
I did run into her at a Mikado event right before the sale was finalized. And I spoke to her and she said, I think you're going to be happy with what we've come up with.
Oh,
So I was like, because what we, at that point, we were looking for a deed restriction. We were looking for a restriction on the land. If it's not a land sale,
mhm.
then either subdivide the land off or put a deed restriction on the land so that it can't be developed.
And a deed restriction is basically the county's version of zoning, like,
Well, no, not really. So a deed
okay.
restriction is attached to your deed.
Okay.
So the deed of your property, it's a description.
Mhm.
It says like from this point to this point to this point to this point, this is the land that you own.
Okay.
So a deed restriction is something that is permanently attached to your deed that
Gotcha.
says this land can never be developed.
Gotcha.
It has a permanent construction, no easement. As a matter of fact, one of the smaller parcels, one of the portions of the Parkhouse property
Mhm.
up on the corner of Old State and Jaeger, it's like 15 acres, cannot be developed because it has a deed restriction on it.
And
Because
and the county put that on?
the county condemned that land. They used eminent domain to acquire that land back
Okay.
in the 80s
Okay.
from the original landowner because they wanted to complete the Parkhouse parcel.
Oh.
Yes,
And so that can never be built on back
that can't be
because
built
of
on.
the restriction they put on in the 80s.
But that was a condition of the eminent domain that the county used to acquire that land.
Mhm. So you thought when you'd spoken with Leslie, Leslie Richards, the commissioner, and she said you're going to be happy with what we came up with. In your
Yeah.
mind, you thought that meant like a permanent restriction on building.
Some kind of a deed restriction, yes.
Gotcha. And did it?
No.
Okay. So what did she think you were going to be happy with?
I honestly don't know because what they
nothing.
came up with
Mhm.
was it was a joke.
Mhm.
What they came up with was a 5-year, they called it a deed restriction. It was basically that the public could have access to the land for 5 years.
So like a moratorium where
Moratorium. Well, no, it wasn't even a prevention of building because our attorneys, our township attorneys evaluated the deed restriction.
right.
And they said it was like the public could, basically it said the public could have access to the land for 5 years
Mhm.
until the developer submits a plan.
Okay.
Okay. Now, keep in mind for 5 years also, they had a tax abatement on that land.
Meaning that they didn't have to pay full price for.
They didn't have to pay taxes.
No
They didn't
taxes.
I don't know how much of the taxes they didn't have to pay, but they got a tax abatement for 5 years.
Because
Because
probably.
because it was like, okay, so I'm gonna venture into theory right now.
Sure.
My theory is that they gave them the 5-year tax abatement to chill them out about developing the land,
Mm-hmm.
and that was their, and in 5 years, our little group would go away.
Okay.
We'd forget about it, and we would all go away.
Right. And so at that point, the new owners bought
Yes.
Parkhouse.
Bought
They
Parkhouse.
bought a good portion of the land.
Can we talk about the sale? Can we talk about how that sale went down?
Sure. How did the sale happen? Go ahead, tell us about it. How did
So
the final sale happen?
the sale happened on March 7th, 2014, during the course of a regular commissioners meeting. The
Okay.
commissioners called a recess, went behind closed doors, and closed the sale.
So
and
when
came
you
out
say
and
call
announced
the
it.
recess, you meaning that there's normally public present at these meetings.
Yes.
And so at a certain point, they called a recess, meaning like a break in
Yes.
the meeting. And
So
at
we're
that
not going to be
point-
doing regular county business. We're going to go behind closed doors right now.
So they went almost like you would be going for coffee. You know.
Yeah, well, they left the room. There's a side room. I don't know if you've ever been to a county commissioners meeting, but there's a side room where they come out of. It's like,
Oh, okay. So they went into the side room.
Apparently, I wasn't at this meeting.
Was it advertised that the sale was going to be closed at this meeting? No. So no, it wasn't on the agenda.
Wasn't on the agenda.
There was no way for the public to know that this sale was
no.
finalized at that moment.
No.
Okay. And
No.
so they had their meeting in the middle.
They had their meeting.
They called
In the middle of the meeting, they called a recess. They went behind closed doors. They signed settlement papers with Scott Rifkin, and then they came back from recess and announced that they had closed the sale.
At that same meeting.
Yes.
Okay. And then at that time, they sold the Parkhouse buildings. They sold the business. They sold everything that went along with it, and the majority of the land. And as you mentioned, Upper Schuylkill Valley Park, because it was not subdivided,
right,
was sold, and then later
it was sold and condemned at the same time.
Okay.
And so they sold it, and then they condemned that property, and then came out and said, hey, we preserved 70 acres for you guys. You should be happy about that.
Right. So they found a way to get through that.
Well, they found a way to spin it for the press.
So part of the deal was it was $42 million that they paid for it. They didn't have to pay taxes on the land, and there was a 5-year restriction,
5-year
temporary restriction.
Public access. There was no restriction. There's no restriction.
If my math is correct, that 5 years ended in 2019. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And so anything exciting happening with that property right now? What is that?
What is that?
What is that?
That is a sketch development plan.
Okay.
That was presented at the January 19th Board of Supervisors meeting.
January 19th, 2021.
2021, 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. Yes. This plan was presented by Scott Rifkin, because Scott Rifkin has sold Parkhouse, but he has not sold the land.
So he kept the land and sold.
He kept the land. So this plan has no residential units listed on it.
Okay.
All it has is amenities. There's going to be a barn with a petting area, a community garden area, farm fields, recreation buildings, farmers markets, equestrian center, an inn, all of these things.
An inn.
And how many? 80 beds, 80 bed inn.
Like a bed and breakfast, or they don't say?
I say hotel.
Hotel, okay.
But they say inn.
Inn.
Because inn sounds quainter, I suppose.
Okay. So
because, yeah, Because I'm looking at this plan and I see all of these roads through here and I'm thinking, are these walking trails? Because they don't connect to anything.
Okay.
Typically a walking trail needs to connect to something.
Mhm.
Well, my first question when I saw this plan, because I saw it a couple days before the township supervisor meeting, and I promptly sent it out to my group of warriors who were, protesting with me in sleet and snow and pouring rain.
Right.
And
Remember Parkhouse now. Now they
yes,
remember Parkhouse. Yeah. Okay.
now we'll remember Parkhouse. Yes.
Mhm.
And I sent it to them, and so we got 180. We had 110 people on the call when
Mhm.
this plan was presented.
Mhm.
What those roads were actual roads.
Okay.
So this plan, what I heard, and what other people have heard differs. This plan has no units on it. So it's a residential building plan, but it doesn't say how many units it's going to be. So we had to ask the developer that,
Mhm.
because he was more interested in these little amenities that he could show us, where, we're interested in how many people are you bringing into this township to use our
Sure.
roads and fire services and everything else.
Sure. Mhm.
This plan is at least 500 to 600 units.
500 to 600 houses.
Units, houses, 300 of which I heard are apartments.
So 300 apartments and 200 houses.
Houses in town, singles and townhomes.
Townhomes. Okay.
Yeah, and like that to me is a low ball. That's a
And
lot.
right, because it's quite a large
It's a
property.
large parcel. It's a large parcel. Now there's places on here that they're showing building that I don't think they can build on, because there's steep slopes, there's wetlands.
Right.
So I don't know how much of that is actually, I don't know how much of this is real and how much of this is just completely unviable.
So just so that we're clear on what that means, is this is basically the very first step that any developer takes when they want to build something, right? They have to submit plans to the township. And
yes,
at this moment in time, even at the time of the submission of this plan, Upper Providence Township still designates that area as open space, correct?
open space with an institutional overlay.
Institutional meaning hospital, school, all the things that we had talked about.
Continuing care, retirement community, etc.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Which is what Scott Rifkin always talked about building, was a continuing care retirement community.
Okay.
We didn't believe that because of Dr. Mankowitz's involvement. Dr. Mankiewicz wanted to build residential.
Right.
Sukonic was involved in this, and Sukonic is residential builders. So we never believed that the CCRC was the end all be all of Dr. Rifkin's plans for this land.
Mm-hmm.
So now this plan comes in, and it's not a plan. It's a sketch plan, which for township purposes, the townships are bound by municipal code, and the municipal code says you have so many days to review a plan in public and make your changes to it. And then you have what they call 3 bites at the apple. You have preliminary, you have final, you have tentative sketch, blah, blah, blah. So this was just like a concept plan that was presented to the public. But I will tell you from my years on the board, and anybody who's ever been involved in local government and knows how development works, development plans like this don't come in cold.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come in, and the developer doesn't come in and say, I'm going to present this to the public and let everybody take a bite of it. That's not how this works.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, this is reviewed by members of the board. Mm-hmm. We found out during the course of the meeting that one supervisor, Helene Kelsey, seemed to know an awful lot about this plan. Mm-hmm. And was kind of like guiding the developer, tell them about this and tell them about that and tell them what could be here and tell them. So because the meeting was held, in the middle of January on Zoom,
right,
which is not transparent at all for government.
Right.
I was able to ask a question via chat, like, why does Helene Kelsey seem to know so much about this plan, and how long has she been working with Dr. Rifkin?
Okay.
Helene Kelsey answered me and told me that she had indeed met privately with Dr. Rifkin prior to
The meeting.
this plan coming before here.
Okay.
And it turns out so did another supervisor, Lori Higgins, who has confirmed this through an email that she has sent to many residents in response to their opposition to this plan.
Okay.
So,
And so at this point, you're organizing again.
mhm, yes, we are.
You're organizing again. Your group is going to be, or is, Remember Parkhouse. And
Remember Parkhouse.
what you're doing is you are opposing the development of the property that's associated.
We're not opposing the development.
Okay.
He has a right to develop the property. We are opposing a zoning change because this plan that was presented will require a zoning change. The property right now, the way it is zoned, cannot be, this is not conforming.
Okay.
So the township supervisors are the only board, the only body of government that has the ability to change the zoning on this.
Okay.
So we're opposing the zoning change.
Okay. And I know it would be kind of a preview, but how do you intend to do that?
Okay, so we have our little Facebook group called Remember Parkhouse. Anybody is welcome to join. We would welcome your involvement. Because it does affect everybody. It affects people. Even if you're not like from this area, it does affect you.
Right.
So we have our Facebook group. We've got that. We have a core group of people who are involved, and we are actively right now in the process of putting out some mailers. We have a GoFundMe account that we're going to use to buy yard signs and stuff like that, possibly even legal representation.
Okay. So if I type in on Facebook, Remember Parkhouse, I would find your group.
You would find my group. You would find a lot of stuff if you.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, and obviously one of the things that we're going to be using the GoFundMe money for is to host our website, which I am currently working on.
Okay.
So it's actually amazing that that now you're doing this project.
The timing is
unbelievable. Yeah,
amazing, right? And so it's actually really interesting. And I think I told you this before we started the recording that I was putting my course together and I was planning this whole project for my students, and I had seen the development posts that you had posted, and I messaged you right away, and I said, would you be interested in doing this interview? And and so I really do appreciate it. It's really very interesting. It's quite the story.
It is quite the story, and it actually, we didn't even really touch on the Logan Square deal. Right. Which, if you don't mind, I'll just do a little sidebar on that, because that's why this whole thing came about in the first place. We have this development coming in here right now, and quite frankly, if this land had never, once this land was sold, it opened it up for development. We knew a development plan was inevitable. So right now, the township supervisors have the ability to decide what goes on that land. Right now, he could build a CCRC. He could build a Shannondale
CCRC,
Hill at White Marsh, meaning continuing care retirement community, something like that.
Because it's zoned for that. It's zoned for that.
It's zoned for that. That's a conforming use.
Right. It doesn't necessarily count as residential if it's got that institutional component to it.
Right, exactly. So it could be a hospital, it could be a school, it could be a church, anything that's institutional could go there. So a CCRC right now could go there, and it could be quite dense. It could be 1,300 units. It could be tall towers.
Gotcha.
But it would also keep a majority of that land the way it is, and we wouldn't have equestrian centers put in the middle of wetlands. And
I don't know. I've seen those villages commercials for in Florida. They seem to have a lot of things for their residents.
Yeah, this is called the Villages at Royersford. So that was another.
Is it really? Yes, that's the name.
That's the name of it. That's the name of it. So
I just was guessing. Okay.
No, it's the Villages at Royersford, and it is not in Royersford.
Oh, right.
So,
Upper Providence, right?
Yes, Upper Providence. So, just to go back to the Logan Square deal, because the Logan Square deal is absolutely fascinating. It was this big hype about bringing in a movie studio.
In Norristown.
Norristown at Johnson and Markley. And the county invested $24.5 million into this project. And the developer put in a bunch of money. The developer was Charles Gallup. His lawyer was Marcel Groen. Marcel Groen was the head of the Montgomery County Democratic Committee at the time. And he was also the lawyer for this development company. There was Ed Rendell tax credits involved in this. So it was this big thing that this was going to be the thing that saved Norristown, that revitalized Norristown. We were going to be the Hollywood of the East.
Right.
All right. So as the project drug on, it became obvious that the Hollywood of the East wasn't going to happen. The movie studio gave way to a parking garage and a janitorial company occupying the old Sears building that was up there. And the project went bankrupt. So when the project went bankrupt, when bankruptcy happens, there's a thing in finance called lien position. So if you're in first position, you get paid first. And then anybody who's behind that gets what's ever left over. So the county commissioners, who at the time were Bruce Castor, Jim Matthews, and Joe Huffle, two lawyers and a mortgage broker, decided it would be a great idea to put the county in second position behind the developer.
Oh, okay.
So when the project went bankrupt, the county got $8,000 on their $24.5 million investment.
Wow.
And apparently 52 million was spent on that property. And honestly, I would defy anybody to go find that money, because I don't know where that went. So 24.5 million of taxpayer money walked away. Nobody seems to care where it went or how it was spent. Just that it's just lost.
It was gone.
And it's gone. So
and
that
it
is,
was at that moment that there was the election.
then there was the election, but you know, at the same time, there was this whole like, it was a lot of backpedaling and covering up, and it was just like, oh, it just went away. So then we had this budget hole, and there were federal repayments. The county had debt service on this loan that they gave of $500,000 a year. $500,000 a year. It was a big chunk out of their budget. So in come these Democrats who were going to do zero-based budgeting and solve all these problems, when in reality, what they were doing was selling assets to pay for operating costs. So, and
this
that's
was one of the big ways that they did that.
This was the way that they did it. This was the way that they did it. They took that money and they paid off the debt. And that came out several months afterwards, but that's what they did.
That's what they did.
That's what they did.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lisa.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for talking
very
with
interesting.
me.
Oh, it's very.
I can talk about Parkhouse for hours.
It's true. It's true. It's quite. I mean, it really is an amazing story. I really appreciate you again just taking the time to go through all the details with me. And I know we like you said, we could be here even longer, you know, if we had the time. But thank you so much.
Yes, and like if I could tell your students, like, look, there's an active group going on right now. And if they're interested, you know, follow us on Facebook. We're on Remember Parkhouse, and eventually I'll get that website back up and running, and it'll be rememberparkhouse.org. I mean, you know, when they sold it, I mean, I didn't even tell you about the billboards that we bought against.
Wow. Oh, so you bought billboards too?
we bought billboards back in 2014 after the sale went up, and one of them was at Main and Markley, so the commissioners had to drive past it every day.
They had to see it every day.
For a month. Yeah, they were awesome.
Yeah, very great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great night and good luck with your cause.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate you talking to me. I really appreciate it. All right.